Hey everyone, welcome back to FSi DFS. We have the biggest slate of the season so far, I believe, if my memory serves me correct. 13 game slate. Only one game has a bit of a rain issue, and that is the Tampa Bay at Chicago game. But yeah, so let's just kind of like dive right in. I feel like there's quite a few pitchers. There's not as many pitchers as I would like on a 13 game slate, but there's also not as many bats that I have interest in as you would expect on a 13 game slate. So it's kind of weird. There's a lot of middle ground in my opinion, but yeah, we'll kind of talk about that as we go through. So top salary, high salary guys, you see Burns, Gallen, Eflin, Nola, Imanaga, and then Sale I have over here in no interest. So let's break this down a little bit, talk about just these six pitchers. So I think three of them really stand out immediately upon looking, and that's Gallen, Burns, and Eflin. Gallen and Burns are facing off against two teams that are the highest strikeout rate teams in the entire league, and then against right-handed pitching. And then you got Eflin facing off against the worst offense in baseball with the White Sox. It is a little bit of a rain threat game, so do pay attention to that. But I feel like these are your top three. I did give an edge to Burns with the weaker matchup going up against Oakland, and then Gallen, and then Eflin after that. Following them, Nola, he's got great upside, and he's going to be pitching in a pitcher's park, but still, that matchup against San Diego is a little bit concerning, and also Nola's floor is somewhat limited. He's been doing very well in his past four starts, after that first one against San Diego. But if you look at the teams that he faced, Washington, St. Louis, Colorado, and the White Sox, that's like four of the worst, 8 offenses in the entire league so far to start the season. So he's had a really favorable schedule. We'll see if that continues on, or his success continues on facing off against San Diego, who's going to be a much better offense than what he has faced in the past month. And then you also got to think about salary coming into play as well, where he's $700 more than Imanaga, $1,300 more than Eflin. Imanaga, though, he is facing off against Boston. He's looked really well to start the season. I do like Boston's been dealing with a lot of injuries. However, I don't know if I trust him yet. I want to go a little bit longer, but him and Nola, I guess, are interchangeable. I wouldn't completely argue against if you go Imanaga over Nola. And then the no interest with Sale. Sale's looked really solid this season. I know the surface numbers don't really, pan out to that. He's got an ERA close to 5. 4. But if you look at his xFIP is closer to 2.7, 2.8. So he's actually been pitching better than these surface numbers are showing. But he is facing off against Cleveland. In Cleveland, believe it or not, the number 1 rated offense against left-handed pitching so far to start the season, which we're a month in. Like, we're starting to get, really solid amounts of data. We're talking like 600 at-bats that these teams are having against these pitch hands. And Cleveland, they're not going to have a whole lot of home run upside to them, but they're still able to do very well. They do have some pop to their bats, and it's kind of more of a no interest for Sale. Not a fade by any means, just not too interested in it. Going into the middle salary tier, Luzardo, I feel, stands above all the rest of the guys. Not too much of a surprise there. He's got a nice home matchup facing off against Washington. We know what his strikeout upside can be. Hasn't really, put it all together so far to start the season. He's had some pretty brutal matchups, facing off against the Cubs in Wrigley, Atlanta, Yankees, we know what they're capable of. But in those weaker matchups, he has shown against the Angels and Pitt, he has shown that he's, able to get that strikeout rate up, keep the walk rate down. Washington, shouldn't be any issue with them. They don't have a super high strikeout rate as a team. Kind of has been that way for years. Even though it's not a great offense, I still think that Luzardo is going to be my favorite mid-tier. After Luzardo, it was kind of a debate between Eovaldi and Cutter Crawford. Crawford has looked phenomenal to start the season. I mean, the numbers just kind of speak for themselves here. And he's going to be facing off against a Cubs team who's going to be without Cody Bellinger. So that's a massive left-handed bat that they're going to be missing, who could be very beneficial in this matchup. They still have a couple of left-handed bats who are, going to be put into their lineup. They got Crow Armstrong, which is like their top prospect in the organization. He's a lefty. He's super cheap on this slate, so he could be a nice value play, I guess, like as a one-off, but he's going to be batting way down in the order, or I would expect him to be batting down in the order. But I do like Cutter Crawford behind Luzardo and then ahead of Eovaldi. Then going into the low tier, Ober is just still too cheap. He's gonna be 9K and above here somewhat soon. He had that one just absolutely disastrous start to start off the season, but after that, shut down the Dodgers, did very well against Detroit. Now he's got another nice matchup going up against the Angels here. So a 6.8K is just, again, way too cheap for what this guy is capable of and his talent. So I would expect him to be fairly popular on this slate, especially as like a cheap SP2 that you're going to be pairing with one of those top guys like Corbin Burns, Gallen, or Eflin if rain is not too much of an issue. Sorry, just try to hold back a yawn. You can see it's after midnight here. I got distracted with the NFL draft. What was I talking about? Yeah, after Ober, we're going to go with Buto, who's looked really well. I thought he was going to fall off a little bit once he was in his last start when he was facing off against the Dodgers, but I mean, he did very well. I mean, for anybody facing off against the Dodgers, 2 earned runs in 4 innings. He got into a little bit of a trouble. The walk rate is a little bit concerning for him over the course of the season thus far, but St. Louis, not an offense that you should be too scared about by any means. And he could be a nice pivot off of what I would expect to be a pretty chalky Ober. A nice leverage play, still high strikeout upside. Great matchup at home, Pitchers Park. Could be a nice pivot if you go in that direction. After him, Louis Heel for the Yankees. This is more of a boomer bust kind of guy. A lot of upside with the strikeouts. He induces a lot of swinging strikes, but at the same time, he also induces a lot of walks and can be a little erratic in his control. Tough matchup facing off against Milwaukee there as well. It kind of wraps up where I want to talk about in terms of the pitchers. I feel like it's definitely get one of these top 3 guys in Burns, Gallen, Eflin, and then pair them with, like Ober. Like I feel like that's probably going to be where the chalk cash build is going to be. Buto and Heel, 2 upside guys, nice pivots. Luzardo for sure. Crawford, yeah. Heading towards the bats, really, I feel like there was one true standout team, and it was going to be Baltimore. Baltimore's going to be facing off against Stripling. Stripling just can't strike anybody out. Low K rate, he's going to be pounding the strike zone, and Baltimore's going to be able to do very well against it. Heston Kierstad, 2.6K, super dirt cheap. He major league debut, 0 for 4, didn't do too well. And then he wasn't in the lineup here on Thursday, but should be back into the lineup here in a lefty-righty matchup. So 2.6K, he's going to be very cheap. I would expect him to see quite a bit of ownership. And honestly, like Baltimore is just chock full of left-handed bats who can absolutely crush right-handed pitching. Colton Cowser, he's got some of the best numbers there. Westberg has been on an absolute tear so far this season. I know he's a right-handed bat, but still, it has been seriously impressive what he's been able to do so far this season. O'Hearn, Mullins, all those guys. And speaking of O'Hearn, I feel like the first base position is pretty loaded, especially with guys who are also fairly cheap. So you got O'Hearn at 4K. Who's the area I'm talking? Nate Lowe, 3.8K. He's going to be very affordable. I like him in that matchup, lefty-righty matchup against Ashcraft. He's going to be batting in the heart of the lineup there. Wade against Priester. It's going to be more so like a bullpen game for Pittsburgh, so I won't look too much into like the lefty righty matchups there. See, here's another Bush, 4.5K. Man, there's one more cheap first baseman guy. I can't remember who it was though. But yeah, so first base is going to see a lot of options, I would say, but Baltimore's definitely going to be my top stack on the day. Atlanta, they're the other team that kind of sticks out to me. On Atlanta, it's going to be a lefty-righty matchup for Arcia, so I would expect him to be batting higher up in the lineup. Again, they're still without Albies, so they need somebody filling that position. It seems to be like Arcia's up there against left-handed pitching, and then Harris is there against right-handed pitching. So expect Harris to be bumped down into the lineup, more into like that 7-8 spot. Arcia should be bumped up into that maybe 2 spot for Atlanta. But regardless, Ozuna, Duvall, I was higher on him earlier on in the season, but he's probably going to be batting, in that 6 spot. Let's see. Yeah, nobody else really I want to talk too much about. Riley's just, man, what a disappointment. What a disappointment he has been to start off on the season, but I feel like he's going to turn it around. We're still in April. Season's still young. Long way to go. Tampa Bay facing off against the White Sox. I mean, just the White Sox are going to be picked on in terms of pitchers against them and then stacks against them as well all season long. But again, pay attention to the rain. Over in GPP, I already mentioned how Cleveland actually has the best numbers in the entire league against left-handed pitching. They're going to be facing off against Chris Sale. It's risky, though. Like, Sale is not just like your average left-handed pitcher. He's a very solid left-handed pitcher. I don't want to ignore that fact at all because that is super important to it. But Cleveland, I still think that they're going to be able to, knock them around a little bit. But Texas is another GPP team that I could see having a lot of interest in. I already talked about Lowe being pretty affordable at first base. There we go. So Lowe's back. I think he's been back for 5-6 days at this point in time, and he's done well in his return, and he's probably going to be closer to 4.5K here in terms of bats relatively soon, I would imagine, but really it's the top bats of Texas that I'm going to have a lot of interest in. They do have some cheaper guys, possibly Duran, but I don't know. I'd typically stick with the more expensive guys for Texas if I was going in that route. But even though they are more expensive, you throw Low in there at 3.8K, you can get some top guys. You can get Corbin Burns, and then we'll just go down. We'll go Buto, just because Ober's probably going to be super chalky. We'll go with Buto. 3.6K remaining for the rest of your bats. Shouldn't be any issue at all. Feeling like them. Cheap. Minnesota, they're just always cheap. Always cheap. I know they're not like super offensive world enders, but I mean, they're very affordable and they're definitely capable. And they treated us very well the other day. Facing off against Sandoval. Sandoval just not great. Allows a lot of hard contact, allows a lot of walks as well. There's probably going to be some cheaper right-handed bats in their lineup. Miranda's probably going to be there at 3.8K. Margot, 2.7K. He could probably be higher up in the lineup as well. These are going to be 2 super cheap right-handed bats that could be up higher in the lineup facing off against a left-handed pitcher here. So even if you just want to do a one-off on either of them, totally fine with that. I feel like that's kind of where the overview of the slate is. I'm absolutely exhausted. My brain is fried at this point in time. I'm normally in bed 2-3 hours ago, but I want to get this video out before the morning. So hopefully this was helpful for you and guiding you in the right direction. Which pitchers to just wipe off the slate, because on a large 13-game slate like this, you just gotta throw some games away. And not pay attention too much to them. Mets, really like them as well. So good luck in your contests as always tonight. Hopefully we'll get a video out for you on Saturday. And see you next time.